It's 7 p.m. Friday, May 17th here in Seoul.
And these are the top stories at this hour. The South Korean government allows business people to visit the shuttered joint Gaeseong Industrial Complex in North Korea for the first time since its closure 3 years ago.
Seoul will provide $8 million in humanitarian aid to North Korea through international bodies, while also continuing to push for food aid to the north.
A South Korean man is freed from militants in Libya after more than 300 days in captivity. The UAE helped in the release, apparently thanks to a summit with President Moon Jae-in.
And tomorrow marks the 39th anniversary of the May 18th pro-democracy movement in Gwangju. A special exhibition is being held in the southern region to remember those who sacrificed their lives for Korean democracy. NEWSCENTER begins now. Good evening, and welcome to Arirang News Center, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Noaram.
And I'm Han-daeun. Thanks for tuning in. South Korea has decided to allow business people to go to the Kaesong Industrial Complex in North Korea to check on their assets there for the first time in 3 years.
The government says it will work with the North to get them there. We have our Kan Hyung-woo at the Unification Ministry on the line for us. Hyung-woo, tell us the latest.
Well, guys, as Tan just mentioned, the South Korean government has decided to allow these business people who had equipment and facilities at the Kaesong complex to go there for the first time since it was shut down in 2016. The Unification Ministry held a press briefing about an hour ago. Let's take a listen.
The government has approved this trip to the north as it relates to the protection of South Korean people's property. The government will do its utmost to ensure that the business people can check on their assets.
The Unification Ministry said the trip will be made by around 200 personnel. The National Security Council on the same day also said that it's going to provide support for the trip so that it can happen soon. This was the 9th time the business owners had requested approval. The government had turned them down 8 separate times over roughly the last 3 years. Seoul has repeatedly explained to Washington that the purpose of the trip to Kaesong is so the South Koreans can check up on their equipment and facilities, and that it has nothing to do with resuming the operation of the complex, a position the Unification Ministry says the U.S. fully understands. But for the trip to happen, Pyeongyang has to cooperate. The Unification Ministry says it has spoken with North Korea about the trip, but isn't giving any more detail about how or when the two Koreas will have discussions. The business people who asked to go to Kaesong welcome the government's decision, but for this trip to be meaningful, they need to be able to inspect their machines and find ways to keep them maintained.
So, Hyung-woo, there is no timeline yet of when these business people will go to the Kaesong Industrial Complex. Could you tell us a bit more about the complex itself?
Right, Aram. So the industrial complex in Kaesong first opened in 2004. It was the result of the peace-building atmosphere on the Korean peninsula after the first ever inter-Korean summit between then South Korean President Kim Dae-jung and then North Korean leader Kim Jong-il in 2000. It's been a symbol of inter-Korean cooperation and one of the major cross-border projects. But it wasn't without its share of problems. Some 120 companies had to leave their assets behind when South Korea announced the shutdown of the complex in February 2016 after North Korea conducted a nuclear test and rocket launches. During the third Moon-Kim summit last September, the leaders of the two Koreas agreed to reopen the complex as soon as the right conditions were in place. The reopening of the complex might be a long shot for now, but the business people who had to leave their property there 3 years ago can at least see what they left with their own eyes as long as North Korea cooperates. That's all from me for now.
Our Kan Young-woo at the Unification Ministry for us tonight. Thank you. The South Korean government also plans to provide $8 million in humanitarian aid to North Korea through international organizations. The National Security Council announced this afternoon that it'll move forward with the $8 million aid to help North Korean children and pregnant women at the request of the WFP and UNICEF. The council also says it'll push ahead with food aid to North Korea, a gesture it says should not be affected by politics. The remarks came during a meeting chaired by National Security Advisor Chung Eui-yong, where council members discussed the World Food Programme's recent report on the North's food situation. The NSC plans to continue reviewing specific plans for the food aid, also reflecting public opinion on the matter. A high-ranking South Korean sports executive is expected in North Korea today for follow-up talks on possibly forming a unified team for the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo. The Korean Sport and Olympic Committee says its Vice Secretary General Park Cheol-gun left for Pyeongyang this afternoon. They will also discuss the South Korean table tennis team possibly competing in an international tournament this July in Pyeongyang. For next year's Olympics, South and North Korea agreed in February to form a joint team in women's field hockey, women's basketball, rowing, and judo. North Korea, though, has not shared any specific plans for that so far. Shifting gears now, the presidential office says a South Korean man who was abducted by armed militants in Libya last year has been released unharmed. The man, identified by his surname Ju, will return home Saturday. Our Shin Se-min reports.
A South Korean man ready to return home after 315 days of being held captive by militants in Libya. The presidential office said Friday that the 62-year-old, identified by his surname Ju, had been freed unharmed on Thursday evening, Korea time. He had been working at a local water plant in the southeastern part of the country. Only one other South Korean national has been held captive for longer, a man held by Somali pirates for 582 days.
Shortly after the man's abduction, our government created a task force team centered on the Foreign Ministry and the National Intelligence Service. We worked with allied governments including Libya, the US, the UK, France, and Italy to help free the hostage.
As well as the task force team, Seoul deployed a warship to Libya last July in an apparent show of force to secure the release of Ju. The ship was relocated from the Gulf of Aden, where it had been carrying out anti-piracy operations, but no military operations are believed to have been pursued. The security chief also said the militants are a known criminal gang that operates in the region, but details of the man's kidnapping and the conditions he was held in are still being investigated. The top office said the United Arab Emirates played an active role in freeing the South Korean man, referring back to a summit between President Moon Jae-in and the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan when they agreed to support Seoul's efforts to secure the man's release. Chung said the UAE's foreign ministry looks to have coordinated closely with Libyan defense officials, but no further details have been made public. South Korea's presidential office reaffirmed it will come up with complementary measures to secure the safety of South Korean nationals in danger zones around the world to prevent similar cases happening again in the future. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Behind the release of the South Korean hostage held captive by an armed group in Libya for over 300 days were the intensive efforts made by the United Arab Emirates. A South Korean Foreign Affairs Ministry official told reporters this on Friday, adding that the UAE's coordination and cooperation with the Libyan National Army was also a big help. While the official did not provide further details on how the release went, he said there was no combat nor negotiation with the abductors. He said the armed group's identity is still being investigated, but doesn't seem to be related to the Islamic State terrorists. The UAE's Foreign Affairs Ministry also released a statement on Friday saying the hostages' release follows efforts to convey a message on the importance of strengthening security and peace in Libya. U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to announce his decision on whether to go ahead and impose new tariffs on cars or delay the decision another 6 months. The Korean government has said that it'll prepare countermeasures for possible scenarios on Washington's decision. Our Ko Ryun-hee has the story.
South Korea is making one last push to protect its car makers from possible U.S. tariffs. The nation's first Vice Minister of Economy and Finance, Gaeseong, met with related ministries and organizations on Friday to check up on preparations before President Trump's expected announcement. He said it is difficult to tell what Trump will say.
We will prepare a response as it relates to the financial market, industry, and employment, based on different scenarios. In the mid to long term, the government will work to diversify export destinations and improve the competitiveness of our products in the auto industry.
He also mentioned the visit to Washington by Seoul's Trade Minister Yoo Myung-hee. She met with U.S. officials this week to ask for an exemption from the tariffs. Speaking to reporters on Thursday at Washington Dulles International Airport, Minister Yoo said the Trump administration and members of Congress have positively evaluated the South Korean government's efforts so far, including the revised Seoul-Washington Free Trade Agreement, which came into force this year. During her visit, she met with top officials, including U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, and White House Economic Advisor Larry Kudlow. In February, the U.S. Commerce Department submitted a report to the White House on whether imported cars pose a threat to national security by negatively affecting American car makers' ability to invest in future technologies. Although the Trump administration has been reviewing tariffs of up to 25% on imported vehicles, many analysts say the revised Seoul-Washington Free Trade Agreement might have settled the possible trade disputes with South Korea in advance. Bloomberg also reported that President Trump plans to postpone the tariff decision and give the European Union and Japan 180 days to agree to a deal that would limit or restrict auto imports into the U.S. However, speaking to Fox Business on Thursday, U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross said President Trump has many options on auto tariffs. Ko Ryun-hee, Arirang News.
Samsung Electronics saw the biggest drop in semiconductor sales among major global chip makers in the first quarter. According to IT industry watcher IC Insights on Friday, the firm's sales fell a whopping 34% on year to just under $13 billion due to slow demand for memory chips. Its rival Intel earned nearly $16 billion in the same period, taking the top chip position from Samsung for the second straight quarter. IC Insights expects Intel to maintain the peak position throughout the year. Meanwhile, Samsung Electronics has significantly increased its R&D investment despite a sharp drop in earnings. According to the company's quarterly report released on Friday, its R&D expenditure stood at nearly $4.25 billion in the first quarter. That is slightly lower than the all-time high of $4.5 billion reached in the last quarter of 2018, but it marks the second straight quarter that the firm's R&D spending has surpassed the $4 billion mark. With its plans to invest big in semiconductors as well as 5G, AI and other future growth engines, Samsung's total R&D spending in 2019 is expected to reach almost $17 billion. The net profit of companies listed on Korea's main stock index, the KOSPI, plunged by almost 40% on year in the first quarter to around $17 billion. The drop is mainly due to the country's poor exports amid prolonged US-China trade tensions. Meanwhile, their sales inched up 0.16% to just over $400 billion for the January-March period. Meanwhile, Seoul's finance ministry has warned of growing downside risks from the slowdown in the global economy and lower demand for semiconductors. In its monthly Green Book released Friday, the ministry noted that the trade talks between the United States and China are a factor behind the volatility in international financial markets, along with the uncertainties over Brexit. Korea's exports fell for a fifth month in a row in April, down 2% on year, mainly due to falling prices of chips and weak demand from China. Exports to China were down for a sixth consecutive month, falling 4.5%. Shifting gears now, and tomorrow will mark the 39th anniversary of the May 18th pro-democracy movement in Gwangju. To remember the historic event, a special exhibition is being held at the very place that was at the center of the protests against the dictatorship of Chun Doo-hwan. Our Yoon Jung-min was there and files us this report.
Video displays show faces of ordinary people from here in Korea and around Asia to represent peace for everyone. Some 4 decades ago, ordinary citizens in South Korea's southern city of Gwangju fought for peace and democracy. These pieces of art are no ordinary displays, but they represent the historical records of the May 18 pro-democracy movement. This year marks the 39th anniversary of the pro-democracy movement, and the Asia Culture Center opened a special exhibition at the former Jeollanam-do government office building in Gwangju, the symbolic place where citizens in 1980 fought against the repressive regime.
I work at a foundation commemorating the historic Jeju April 3rd incident. The May 18th movement is also an important time in history, and it's meaningful to have this exhibition for visitors to remember, commemorate and learn from history.
I was a 6th grader when the democracy movement happened. I was so scared and then I fled to my grandmother's place in Hwasun. Decades have passed since then and now I have visited this place again. It makes me recall heartbreaking memories, but it's good that visitors can learn about the history.
In 1980, Chun Doo-hwan grabbed power in a coup. Citizens in Gwangju led massive protests, calling for Chun to step down and abolish the martial law. Chun brutally cracked down on the movement, causing hundreds of deaths. The May 18 pro-democracy movement in Gwangju served as a catalyst for Korea's democracy and is remembered to this day. The special exhibition runs until August 18th, and the symbolic meaning behind the works on display leaves visitors with a deeper impression of what happened here 39 years ago. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Gwangju.
The United States has been lobbying for months now to prevent its Western allies from using Huawei equipment in their 5G deployment. And on Thursday, Washington made it more difficult for the Chinese telecom giant to do business on American soil. Our Won Jung-hwan explains.
The trade dispute between the U.S. and China has intensified, with Chinese telecom company Huawei caught in the middle of the escalating tension. The Trump administration has added Huawei, along with over 60 affiliates in more than 24 countries, to its so-called entity list on Thursday. The latest move that immediately enacts restrictions making it difficult for the Chinese tech giant to do business with American companies comes less than 24 hours after the U.S. Commerce Department first gave notice that it was adding Huawei to the list. The restrictions become official on Friday and include a ban on companies on the list such as Qualcomm from buying parts and components from American firms without the U.S. government's approval. Getting the approval won't be easy, with Washington stating it will review applications under a, quote, policy of presumption of denial. The executive order signed by President Trump says Huawei's products pose a security threat, citing a criminal case pending over allegations Huawei violated U.S. sanctions against Iran. In Europe, however, things are not heading in the direction that Trump wants. The leaders of countries including Germany and France said Thursday that their governments do not plan to follow the lead of the U.S. and ban Chinese telecom companies from involvement in their national 5G high-speed mobile networks expansion. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said companies could participate in expanding Germany's 5G network if they meet established safety criteria. French President Emmanuel Macron echoed Merkel's sentiment at an industry conference in Paris, saying that it's not appropriate to start a trade dispute over technology. Won Jung-hwan, Arirang News.
President Trump has announced a new immigration policy for the United States focused on skills and education rather than family ties. Lee Min-sun has the details.
President Trump announced plans for a revised immigration policy on Thursday local time during a speech at the White House's Rose Garden. Trump laid out the new policy, which would give priority to immigrants with higher educational backgrounds, extraordinary talent, professional and specialized vocations, instead of the current family tie-based policy.
Companies are moving offices to other countries because our immigration rules prevent them from retaining highly skilled and even, if I might, totally brilliant people. We discriminate against genius. We discriminate against brilliance. We won't anymore once we get this passed, and we hope to get it passed as soon as possible.
Trump had been arguing that a family-based immigration policy causes chain migration that allows immigrants to invite their relatives to the country, which he claimed undermines jobs for Americans and eventually threatens U.S. national security. The Trump administration plans to reduce family-based immigration and expand merit-based or employment-based immigration for highly skilled workers. However, it seems unclear whether the new policy will be passed, as it faces strong opposition from the Democratic Party and also from some Republicans. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
An oil tanker from Iran has unloaded cargo at a Chinese port, but with forged documents to make it look like the oil came from Iraq. If this is confirmed, it could further escalate tensions between Washington and Beijing. Our Cha Sang-mi reports.
Ship tracking data from tracking firm Refinitiv Icon showed a tanker carrying Iranian fuel oil in violation of U.S. sanctions has unloaded the cargo into storage tanks near the Chinese city of Zhoushan. A representative at the oil storage terminal confirmed that the tanker, named Marshall Z, discharged nearly 130,000 tons of Iranian fuel oil, and that the trip began 4 months ago. According to Reuters, Iranian fuel oil managed to dodge U.S. sanctions on petroleum exports by using ship-to-ship transfers, including the Marshall Z, and by forging documents that disguise the cargoes as from Iraq. The Marshall Z, according to ship tracking data, arrived at the Jinran terminal on May 8th, and the cargo was not discharged before reaching the terminal about 30 kilometers south of Zhoushan near Shanghai. The fuel could be stored at Jinran without clearing Chinese customs and officially entering the country, as it offered bonded storage at the terminal. The data showed Marshall Z unloaded the fuel oil on May 12th. This comes less than 2 weeks since the Trump administration stepped up its moves to pressure Iran by ending waivers that granted 8 countries importing limited quantities of Iranian crude oil, including South Korea and China. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
Along with non-memory chips and bio and health, the Moon Jae-in administration has pointed to future cars as one of the nation's top 3 future growth engines. Here's our Kim Hae-sung on what this industry is all about and what it can offer to the auto sector.
South Korea's top automaker Hyundai Motor is betting on hydrogen cars with plans to increase its production from 2,500 units this year to more than 10,000 by next year. The eco-friendly cars combine hydrogen with air in a fuel cell, which produces electricity and water as a byproduct.
Environmental regulation is strengthening due to global warming and fine dust pollution, so the market for non-emission cars like hydrogen electric cars will grow. We've been leading the development of hydrogen fuel cells since 1998, and we're now working on improving cost efficiency, as the platinum used as material for the fuel cells is expensive.
Currently, hydrogen-powered cars are priced at more than $60,000, half of which is covered by government subsidies. To drive down production costs by increasing the scale of manufacturing, the government announced plans in January to work with the private sector to increase production to 6 million by 2040, which will include hydrogen taxis and public buses.
To help provide the infrastructure needed to boost the use of hydrogen-powered cars, the government has vowed to increase the number of hydrogen fueling stations across the country.
Hydrogen cars are just one example of future cars. The Moon administration is also set to announce a comprehensive plan to nurture driverless cars and smart cars like models with 5G and AI-based infotainment services. Korea's auto industry is key to the local economy, accounting for about 13% of the country's manufacturing production, not to mention employing 350,000 people. But sales and exports have fallen in recent years.
Amid fiercer global competition and slowing demand, local automakers' competitiveness has weakened. Companies need to find new growth in eco-friendly cars and electric cars, which are now the global trend.
The initial stages of boosting the market require a lot of investment, and government support like tax benefits and infrastructure building play an important role. Efficient use of money, detailed plan, and policy consistency will be key to the success of this sector. 김혜성, Arirang News.
If you're moving around a big city like Seoul, you may have found yourself too close to your destination to take public transport, but too far away to get there on foot. Now, a number of so-called micro-mobility platforms are trying to close this gap with things like bike sharing. Our Oh Soo-young tells us more.
It's one block too far to walk, but too close to take a taxi or a bus. In recent months, new sharing platforms have been popping up in Korea, creating dockless mobility solutions for commuting and travelling short distances around the city. A bike-sharing service in Seoul offers rental rates of 200 won or less than 20 cents for 10 minutes, compared to the fixed hourly rates charged by existing bike-share platforms.
Our service helps reduce commute time substantially and also makes it more enjoyable. Our users mostly use G-bikes for 15 to 20 minutes at a time, although some use it for much longer.
As the bikes are dockless based on a GPS system, you don't have to look for a designated bike stand when you arrive at your destination. You can simply leave it there for someone else to use. Electric scooter rentals are also offering a more compact and speedier way to get around the city while beating the traffic, and can go up to 25 kilometers per hour.
Scooters have largely been used for leisure, but it's an ideal means of transport in a complex city. It's also eco-friendly. 80% of cars on the road are used by the driver alone. Electric scooters are 100th of their size and also consume 100th the amount of energy, without emitting greenhouse gases. The number of users and the level of usage has grown threefold since March 1st.
As popular and convenient as electric scooters are becoming, there are still some safety issues and regulations that need ironing out.
Electric scooters can't be used on sidewalks or bicycle lanes, as they could pose a danger to pedestrians and cyclists travelling under 25 kilometers per hour. Platform companies have complained this hinders their businesses from growing. Given the surge in demand for micro-mobility services and promising market prospects, a Transport Ministry official has said some of these restrictions may be eased and some safety standards revised during the latter half of this year. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Former UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon, who heads the new Presidential Committee on Climate and Air Quality, has called for parliamentary support to deal with fine dust pollution. In a meeting with the leader of the main opposition earlier today, Ban said the fine dust issue should not be politicized, urging parties to work together to find a solution. Ban said he plans to devise short-term measures this year after gathering opinions from experts and the public. Liberty Korea Party chief Hwang Kyo-an called for more active cooperation with China, which has been pointed to as a key contributor to fine dust. Verizon has started selling the Samsung Galaxy S10 5G in the United States, the first device to support 5G technology out of the box. Currently, Verizon's 5G network is only available in Chicago and Minneapolis, but will expand to 20 American cities by the end of this year. Its rival, Sprint, meanwhile, says it will begin accepting pre-orders for their first 5G phone starting on Friday and will launch it at the end of this month. South Korean actor Song Kang-ho will become the first Asian to receive the Excellence Award at the upcoming Locarno International Film Festival. The award is for Song's role in director Bong Joon-ho's film Parasite, which was also selected for this year's Cannes Film Festival. The Locarno International Film Festival will be held in August in Switzerland. A second-hand bookstore run by the city of Seoul is holding a special exhibition of magazines from the 1970s through the early 2000s. Seoul Book Pogo in Jamsil is displaying some 1,200 magazines, including many first editions collected over the years by second-hand bookstore owners. Many of the magazines on display are for sale, except the ones set aside for conservation. The exhibition runs until the 28th and is open to the public for free. That has been your 3-minute news flash. It is now time to take a look at some of the digital media content available on Arirang's social media platforms.
And Onion News is back, looking at the top trending stories on the internet.
Every Friday, this mysterious Ani will keep you up to date with the hottest stars of the week. But wait, what is star? Welcome to the special edition of Ani News. Okay, so if you are a Gen Z, you probably have no idea what these toys represent to the people who were born in the 80s. Or do you? I'm sure you've seen a picture or two of these cutesy little things called tamagotchi. It's an egg-shaped toy which you raise your virtual pets. And guess what? They're coming back! Woo! So let's take a look at the upgraded version of Tamagotchi. First, forget about black and white screen. Duh, it's 2019. Of course it has colored digital screen. Second, it syncs with your smartphone and allows you to link with other Tamagotchi players. So you can go on play dates. And then maybe they will go on romantic dates, and then they get married and have their own family. Oh my god, does that mean I can be a virtual grandparent? Who's your biggest crush these days? How about this guy? His name is Son Heung-min, aka Sonny, the Tottenham Hotspur star. There was a short clip released by OneFootball of Sonny smiling at his fellow players' children after the Tottenham vs Everton match last weekend, and described him as the nicest man on the planet. Who would disagree? I mean, look at his smile. Just look at it. Aww. Actually, this is not the first time fans are swooning over his warm smile towards children. He greeted with the biggest smile on his face when a Korean boy visited the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium as a prize he won at the Catalina Partners event in April. Hey, I agree. It seems like Sonny wants a son. Last week, we learned the term insa. Hey, add the word item and you get insatem. Insatem means an item owned by incas, so basically things that the it tribe owns. But here's the thing about insatems. You want to own it, but you also don't want people staring at you in public. Oh, what do you think of this specific item? Can this be the insatem of the United States? A few days ago, Louisiana Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser greeted U.S. President Donald Trump wearing Trump socks. Trump hair socks, to be exact. You can comb it, change the style, do everything you want to make a fashion statement. I'm not really sure if you want to purchase these Trump socks, but one thing's for sure, it's on its way to become an insatem. That's it from this mysterious Ami. If you liked what you just saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe this channel. Bye!
Despite today's overcast skies, temperatures hovered around 30 degrees Celsius.
Yes, and those clouds are going to bring some rain, thankfully, after the much hot weather that we've been having. Let's get more from our Michelle Park at the Weather Centre. Michelle, what's the latest?
Good evening, guys. Now it's already raining in Jeju, and that rain is set to expand across the nation overnight with some thunderstorms. And in fact, the rain will affect the southern areas all throughout the weekend, while Beijing and Tokyo are expecting some gloomy skies. And Jeju Island will see rain of up to 200 millimeters, while Jeollanam-do and Gyeongsang-do provinces can expect 20 to 60 millimeters. And the central region, including the capital, will see sporadic showers over the weekend, bringing down 10 millimeters at the most. Now, although the daytime highs are cooling down, the morning lows will stay the same or a bit higher. Now, the morning will kick off between 16 to 18 degrees Celsius, or beginning at 18 degrees Celsius. Now, Saturday afternoon will be cooler than today, but still higher than the seasonal average. The Seoul will top out to 26 degrees, while the southern regions are much cooler with the continuous rain. Rain is in store until next Monday, but after that, we can expect some hotter weather. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That will do it for us for this edition of Arirang News. Thank you as always for watching.
Stay tuned to Arirang for more analysis on current issues and news in depth coming up next.